Hey guys, Coach Coco here, rocking my Clark's Rams wrestling. Love this club, one of the best small schools in Nassau County D2. Shout out to the Leonards. We're going to invite Coach Jabari Irons on. Irons, solid wrestler. We were supposed to go at 1, but I uh, I got on 5 minutes early because, if you ain't early, you're late. So that's one of the big things that we reinforce with our program and the kids we coach is if you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. You got to get them understanding time management, time control. It's really important. It's very, very important for them to understand time management, especially as a student athlete, right? Because they're balancing classes, they're balancing social, they're balancing practice. But again, you also have to have the honest conversation with them, like you're gonna have one's gonna suffer if you put all your eggs in two of these baskets. So it's important for them to understand nothing great can be accomplished without sacrifice. So you have the student, you have the academic side, you have the athletics, wrestling, practice, drills, conditioning, and then you have social. So it's important to be well rounded, but during the season, obviously, one is going to the back burner. And that's a big challenge we face as coaches, especially in society today. We want it all. We want to have everything. But in life, there's always trade-offs. You can have the great job, but you got to commute an hour. Or you can have the close job, you make less money. Or you want the nice house, but it's not in the nice area, etc. There's many examples of this, but everything in life, there's a trade-off. So not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything goes your way. That's okay. You got to be ready for that and expect that. Let's see. Shout out to Rams Wrestling Club. Coach Irons. Really want to get an idea of what's going on in the Southwest wrestling scene. See where he's at. There he is. See what's going on. I mean, I hear Florida wrestling is growing tremendously. So I'm trying to always stay on top of these trends. There he is.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, Coach Irons. Nice to see you today. Catch up with you. You cut out a bit, but just checking in. How are
Yes,
you?
sir. I'm doing well. How are you?
Great.
It's a
Uh,
pre- it's, it's a pretty good Saturday, so no real complaints.
a lot of rain up here. I'm in New York, but it's starting to clear up today. Starting to
Yeah,
clear up.
there was some rain around here the last couple of days, but nothing like too drastic. We still can carry on our, daily life errands and things that we got to get to. So it's not too much to hold us up down here.
The first thing I got to ask you, of course, is just checking in on the home front. Like, obviously, the hurricane and the whole storm situation. Is everything all good with you and the
Yes.
club? It's
Yeah.
been
Oh man. So yeah, everything's good. Everything's good. We didn't really get hit that bad where I live, but
hmm
on like the surrounding streets, things did, like we had some gas stations like completely tip over. Had a couple
wild.
friends who, yeah, had a couple friends who completely lost like their homes, like flooded. Luckily the training center, the most that damage that we had was like the roof, and then that led to some of the drywall getting mold and stuff. So it really only took maybe like a couple of weeks that we were out, and then for the time being, I found some nearby training centers as far as like MMA and boxing gyms, and we just used those for the time being. So I was thankful to have those connections.
So it's so that's great to hear. It sounds like the club is up and running and up and rolling. Tell how's the program looking? How are you guys doing with your
Um,
practices preseason right now?
yeah, yeah. So the high schoolers, I'll start off with my little kids. So like my youth club, I love the little kids, man. They're sponges. So I have a good core group of about let's say 6 kids who I've retained for the last 2 years. So this is their third season with me. So I'm actually starting to like build and like their basics are almost, drilled in. So now we hit all the basics the first 15 minutes of practice, and then we move on and focus to our focus groups and what we need to focus on. So that's going amazing, man. I'm getting to see the kids grow and develop from like never having any experience to like now they're actually looking like wrestlers. So that brings me joy all the time. The high schoolers, I always notice that there's a wave of attendance. The summer times it's packed. Springtime it's packed. But when school starts down here, they've been in school since August. So typically when school starts down here, they go back to their high schools. They go back, and once they start practicing there, then they kind of drop out of club. But
Mm.
but what I always see is that whenever postseason gets here, they come storming back in club. Coach, I need to work on this. I need to work on that. I have multiple kids at the very end of season trying to book private lessons, and it's like I've been teaching and telling you guys about consistency this entire time. Like if you see a coach or a particular program is aiding in your growth, you can't just
Cut it
cut the lifeline.
off.
Yeah, cut the lifeline, because once you see, your skill level or, your body start to deteriorate, I'm kind of like putting it as like a dietary standpoint, like an
Mm.
example. You're doing great. You've lost 50 pounds on your diet, but you haven't hit your 100-pound mark. Now, once you hit your 50 pounds, it's not like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go back to eating how I used to because I got some gains. Like, no, once you cut that lifeline, you start to reverse. So
Right, right.
I've seen it for the last 3 years. So my high schoolers who have been consistent, man, they are making leaps and bounds right now, and I'm pretty excited to see how they'll do this postseason. So we got two good groups of youth and the high schoolers right now.
Coach Irons, that's awesome, and I hear you. A lot of the time, the wrestlers are trying to, jam everything in at the end. When it comes to
Mm-hmm.
training, you said it perfectly. Consistency is key. So
Agreed.
I think of it like strength training, right? Say you wrestle a match and you get out muscled. What do you think? You're going to just start lifting weights, and in 1 week you're going to be stronger,
Right,
right? It's
right.
going to take time, and I see the same thing with strength training. Wrestlers cut it completely off. They stop going to the club practices with guys like you, and they
Mhm.
stop the lifting. And in your opinion, obviously consistency seems like a big part of your program, but how much you think those high school guys should be with working with somebody like you, and kind of how do you work with the high school coaches? Like, are you doing different techniques and your club than they're doing at the high school? Kind of like your philosophy around that as a club coach now.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
start with so I think that if you want to be top in the state, let's say state placer, state qualifier, state placer, I would say you need to be going to a club practice at least 2 times a week.
That's what
And
I was
that's
thinking
minimum.
too.
That's minimum because um, so what I like to focus on is I never really know what all of the high schools are teaching and what their focuses are. But I started to notice, and I've only been at this coaching thing in a facility. This is my 4th year. Um, Independently, this is my 5th year.
Mm,
So I've kind of been adjusting and feeding off of the information that I get back from the wrestlers and how they react to the practices that I'm running. So of like 4 years of trial and error, what I've come to develop in my sense of coaching is that it is not my job to make sure that they're conditioned. It is my job to make sure that they are prepared technically. So when I first started out, I wanted to make sure that they were in top shape and that they had the best conditioning. Um, but alongside of that, this technique and conditioning came through the wrestling. So I don't believe in, old school style sprints, up downs. I don't believe in any of that. My strength and conditioning comes from and through wrestling. So I was pushing my high schoolers so hard, live drilling, scenarios, situations. But then I realized that when I started to push the pace on them, then their technique would kind of go out the window because it would kind of go out the window. And what I started learning was that their high school coaches are also pushing them technique, not technique wise, but physically. So then when they come to my club, it's like they're already beaten and battered. And here I am screaming at them harder, harder, harder. Well, I know one of the biggest factors that kind of opened my eyes was that the attitudes that I was getting, the attitudes, the lack of enthusiasm, as well as the lack of effort. And in my mind, I'm saying, don't you guys have goals and dreams? But I'm not really understanding what their body's already going through. Now, don't get me wrong. They still need to be working when they come into my club, but I've taken a more technical sound approach when it comes to my practices. So what I use is I use like a collage of all the training styles that I was put through. So our first 15 minutes of practice, so I took Kerry Colat's approach with the high schoolers. Everybody knows how to tumble. Everybody knows how to roll. So we shouldn't be spending 30 minutes doing cartwheels and doing, front rolls, right? We get moving with dynamic stretch and high knees, inside shuffles, butt kicks. Once we get them moving, they do some sprints, get their heart rate up, and then we immediately go into active drilling. So we'll active drill. I'll say, you know what, duck on the drill. Duck on the left side, right side, left side, right side.
I
But
like that.
everything is super slow. Everything is very technical. So we're bouncing and we're dancing as we're drilling, no finishes. Once they get warmed up, then I'll say, okay, stretch. Stretch for 2 minutes, roll their necks out for another 2-3 minutes, do some kickovers, walk your feet around your head, back bridges, things like that. Then we really start drilling. Now, this is for technique as well as for conditioning. So we get our conditioning done first 15 minutes of practice. So I take them through, they need to be able to, there's a set, solid skill set that all of my wrestlers need to be able to have. They need a head inside single, head outside single. They need a double leg. They need shot, reshot. They need head inside and outside defense. And they also need front headlock offense. At a minimum, those are the skills that they all need. They need to be able to attack head inside, outside, defend head inside, outside, and they need to be able to go shot, reshot. I think that last one, that front headlock, is probably one of the most critical areas because way too often we see wrestlers get stalemated in the front headlock. We can't have any of that. Score, high percentage, keep it simple, catch the ankle, spin behind. So then after we go through that, that's the first 15 minutes of practice. So with the warm up and going through that, we add some hand fighting in. That'll be 30 minutes. We still have an hour left. Strict technique.
That's solid, coach. I hear you. Yeah, I like your approach.
Yes, sir.
Um, and then going from the high school, I always thought should focus on the fundamentals and conditioning. Where they come to a club coach, we got a lot of clubs here in New York, Long Island, upstate. Is that they should be working like you're saying, a specific sport aspect, drills, techniques, because it's like doubling down on the damage, right? So it's like when they go to the
Right.
technique, they should be working on specific areas. I'll use an example, head inside finish on the mat or finishing, you know, low single out the back door. I'm just using random, but like very
Yep.
specific, very technical, very niche type of situations and scenarios. But I really like how you did the call-out approach where you're getting right into the skills and drills. I like the duck unders
Mm-hmm.
with younger kids, teaching them that duck versus before the finish, before the takedown, getting them that level change because they have a hard time dropping to that knee, right? I'm sure you've seen that.
Yes.
I learned
Yes.
that the hard way as a coach. But yeah, I love your philosophy. It's just like we're gonna get right into it, and no, we're not gonna condition. This ain't football practice, bro. We're gonna get right into
Right.
wrestling. We're now doing
That's
up
right.
downs. And so for the listeners who are on here jumping on with Coach Irons and I, he's located in Southwest Florida, Cape
Hmm.
Coral, right? Cape Coral area.
Yes, sir. Cape
So,
Coral.
so we're talking about Florida, different wrestling scene, and how have you seen that grow? And how do you feel like the club has helped grow? Because you're from that area originally, right? Wrestled at a high school over there.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I'm interested in
So
that trend for
yeah,
sure
so
in
I
wrestling.
wrestled high school. I wrestled about 2.5 years in high school, 3 seasons. Started in 2011. The wrestling scene down here has, I would say, it has grown pretty tremendously, especially with the introduction of women's wrestling. Getting it sanctioned within a year, 2 years, we've seen teams go from having one or two women wrestlers to entire teams, 20, 30 girls. That's all over Southwest Florida. So it recently has boomed quite a bit. On the club side, on the club side, it hasn't grown tremendously. My club right now is still the only independent wrestling club. Some of the high schools around have developed clubs. Riverdale High School has probably been over 20 years of a wrestling club. They are the pioneers of this area. They get about top three, top five every single year, 2A and 2A state. So they've been, doing great. Cape Coral has had one for the last, let's say, 10 years. Now recently, Mariner Wrestling Club has just opened up, and they're doing great. They're like really my only competitors around here, and I got a lot of love for Coach French and Coach Mike, and they're doing an amazing job. So I love that we are creating more wrestlers and developing more wrestlers, because I feel like that's really where you find the growth. Too many coaches try to market to other sports saying, come wrestle, this will make you better in another sport. I feel that we shouldn't be doing that at all. We should be finding non-athletes, children who have never been introduced to a sport, and we should be creating more wrestlers. I feel like that's where we're going to get maximum growth at the youth level.
Interesting point. Um, I never thought of it that way in that sense of getting them clean slate from scratch, but it should be a thing from the jump, like elementary school. School's got to introduce wrestling and
Correct.
PE again. And I always thought too, in my opinion,
That's
with
awesome.
football specifically, right? Like if you're a defensive end or a lineman on either side of the ball, like how are you not wrestling? How are you not learning how to hand fight as in
Right.
conjunction?
Right.
But yeah, I think that is there's a flaw in that marketing idea. Like, oh, this will make you faster for soccer or something. Like I think
Right.
we gotta like promote wrestling within wrestling, or like, hey, you've never tried a sport before, you're gonna learn how to have athleticism, you're gonna learn how to compete, you're gonna have good sportsmanship, things of that nature. I get what you're saying.
Right. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with supplementing. I just think that there's not a ton of retention when we go and we recruit wrestlers and athletes from other sports. Don't get me wrong, I was a two-sport athlete. I turned down a full ride to play football, linebacker in college, to go wrestle. So don't get me wrong, there's nothing with supplementing, but I was one of the few that decided to choose wrestling over football. I feel like that's not very common at all. So my first year coaching high school, what I started doing was um, I noticed that when preseason came, I only had a few kids, and it would
Mm.
make me upset because I'm like, man, this school does not realize the amount of experience they have in a brand new wrestling coach. And I was, asking all the kids, come wrestle, come wrestle. And they were saying, oh, after football, oh, I play basketball. And I was like, and then my head coach would say, oh, after football season, we should get at least, 8 guys. And I'm just like, but when they come
Yeah.
after football season, wrestling season's halfway over, and we're going to be delayed, and they're not going to know anything. So at the time, I was teaching a computer class, like a Microsoft class, and I literally just started. And I always be facetious, and I say I recruited a bunch of computer nerds, but I was recruiting non-sport athletes. Like I would see a random kid in the hallway, and I say, "Hey, you play a sport?" They would say no, and I say, "How much do you weigh?" "Oh, I weigh 120 pounds." And I would say, "Perfect. We have a spot for you on the wrestling team." "Oh, no, I'm too small. I've never." And I'd say, "You weigh 120 pounds, right?" "Yep." perfect. There's a weight class of 120 pounds. You will only
That's
wrestle
awesome.
people that look like you. And I would say, man, you have nice long arms, man, you'd be good at, catching some ankles, or you have a nice build. Like, and I would make them feel good about who they were. And they started to have confidence in that. And that's what I love about wrestling too. You don't have to be compared height wise, body style, muscle build. Like, you can be successful no matter what. And I think like that's what I use in my marketing to get to get that growth in the sport.
That's great for coaches who are listening, middle school, high school level. Greg, you got to do recruiting in that. Like, I coach at the college level here, and it's a different type of recruiting, but you still have to recruit in those hallways, in those PE classes. You got to
Mhm.
get in front of kids. That's good though. You gave them some positive feedback. You said, "Listen, this is for you." It's
Yep.
challenging in football and basketball. Now everything is about height and
That's
size.
right.
It's like a circus event now instead of like who's the
Hmm.
best player. You I don't you look at some guys from the past, some athletes, they would have never been able to get in the NBA or NFL now because of their height,
That's
but they're
right.
ballers. It's
That's
ridiculous. It's
that
not
was one of the factors that helped me choose wrestling. I'm someone, I want to be 100% in control of my future and in my fate. You know what I mean? Putting God first, but
master
everything on earth,
of your destiny.
yeah, everything on earth, I want to be able to control that. You know what I mean? So with football, my senior year, I had some of the best stats in the state. Me, we love your film, but we're going to have to change your position from linebacker to safety because, you're a couple inches too short. And I'm just like, how are you going to tell me that my skills are highly sufficient, but an uncontrollable like my height is not? So now you're changing my position and you're putting me in a field that I'm less likely to succeed at. And I have to pretty much learn a whole new skill set. So I'm just like, you guys, you're not setting me up for success. Anything that I do, I want to reach the highest level. That's always the goal. And if the highest level, if that mark is the NFL, you're already telling me that I'm not tall enough to be competitive at my position, linebacker, in college, so you're gonna have to change my position. I was like, nah, wrestling never told me any of that. I got a missing finger on my left hand. I got a torn hamstring on my, my left hamstring's torn. My neck isn't very long, and all of these like ailments.
Mhm.
But wrestling never once said you're not good enough. You
Right.
know what I mean? Mm,
So yeah, that's good to hear that because for the other people listening, um, yeah, linebacker a lot of times wrestlers just naturally gravitate right with the tackling and the angles,
right.
but that's what's great about wrestling. Weight classes for everybody. You could be tall and skinny. You could be short and stocky. Like styles make wrestlers.
Mhm.
You could figure out techniques that work for you, and obviously that's like the individual aspect, right? But thinking about back to your career, obviously you had a long journey. What do you think the biggest thing you took away from wrestling is that you learned that you try to promote in your club? Like
So
biggest
the
life thing,
biggest
yeah.
lesson that I've learned is accountability. Um,
It's
and
key.
I say it from a standpoint of holding yourself accountable. And that is one of the lessons that will punch you in the face every single time. You'll either be rewarded or you won't. There's very little instances where if you're not accountable, you will still reap the results. So I feel like anytime I've been at the top of my game, I've been doing extra. I've been honing in on what coach is telling me. I've been coachable. I've been lifting in my free time, goal setting, action plan setting. I feel like holding myself accountable was always the biggest tell of if I was succeeding or not. And if I didn't succeed in my goals, I could always go back and look at my goals, look at my action plan, and see were you doing all of these things that you said that would get you to that final destination? If not, who can I blame? I can only come back and blame myself. So that's one of the biggest things that I loved about wrestling as well, is that everything, you can control every single aspect, and there's no one to point the finger at but ourselves. So I feel like that is the biggest lesson that I've taken away. Also, that once you're accountable, accountability breeds consistency. Accountability breeds focus. All the tools that you need for success will come directly out of accountability.
That's awesome, Coach. Yeah, accountability is one of our themes in our program, and our so we have 6 themes, and I posted it on my story. And accountability is definitely one of them because, like you said, accountability breeds other positive
That's
qualities:
right.
consistency, hard work, dedication. And that's awesome to think about. Obviously, we got a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you about your experience in Serbia. Now to fast forward a little
Oh
bit, we're
yeah,
talking about
yeah,
like competing again, the beach wrestling. It must have been one great for your athletes to see you compete because it
right.
creates buy-in. It's like it creates like,
That's
wow,
right.
coach is serious. So it's like good to model that you're willing to put yourself out there. What'd you gain from that experience? That's pretty wild that you went halfway across the world
I
from
know, and
Florida.
I'm trying. I'm doing my best to get back active, man.
That's what's up.
The biggest thing that I took out of wrestling overseas was that
Had to
position
ask. Yeah.
position really matters. Man, like I can pretty much score on anybody. But some of these guys that I was wrestling from Georgia, Republic of Georgia, and Bulgaria, their head position was phenomenal. Like, and I've seen it a lot in freestyle, but I've never seen it in beach. And like, this was my they will down block you so much to the point to where they don't care if you grab their head, because their head hands defense is so good that you won't even be able to use your front headlock on them as well. So they'd rather give up a front headlock than give up their legs. And that
Mm.
was probably the biggest lesson that I've learned. Like, I was getting them to reach, I was arm dragging them, I was ducking them under, but it was like every single thing that I did, they would duck their head back down, and I'd run into their head every single time, no matter if I beat their hands or not. And I'm just like, wow, you're sacrificing your head, but I still can't get to your legs because you're controlling my hands once I grab your head. You're controlling my elbows. Like, even if you grab a front headlock, they're clamping on and they're pushing you out of bounds. So, like, that, and then the stance. I would say the stance difference in
That bent
beach.
over, like,
Yes, but what I noticed was majority of their weight is on the back foot. It's not on the front foot.
mm,
In folk style and in freestyle, a lot of times we have a tendency to put a lot of weight on our front foot.
sugar foot, we
Um,
call it. Yeah,
Right,
leaning all that
because
weight on that.
when you get clubbed down in freestyle, you can just put your hands on the ground and circle back up. But that's a lot more difficult in beach because if your hand
So,
gets
yeah,
buried under the sand, now you're losing your balance on your hands. So those guys ankle their back foot down. So when you push against them, they already have a way to push back. But when you go to snap them, snap their arms and head snap, they're also not falling forward because there's no weight on their front foot. So that was huge. That was huge. And then it really emphasized me creating motion with the push pull, push pull. I would say, man, those were the biggest takeaways, and I'm still implementing those things even in my folk style or freestyle. I'm still implementing those because those are good lessons to have as well, controlling space and controlling the mat.
that's awesome. And I agree entirely. Positioning is key. We always
Hmm.
talk about head and hands defense and getting your head in the pocket, like especially on a down block or you said it earlier, reshot's a big part of your curriculum.
Right.
So, or like reattacking, rescoring. Have you been able to like integrate those concepts into your teaching your wrestlers? Like, has this experience now like changed how you teach technique a little?
Yes. When I first got back, I was heavily teaching them this stuff with positioning. I'm always yelling at them, especially the little kids, get your head down, get your head down,
Yeah.
and I'll tell them,
You got to get the head in the way.
yeah, and
Yeah.
man, it's so
Yeah.
frustrating with them, but
Of
I'm
course.
always telling them, hey, is his head lower than your head? Yes. Okay, well, that means you're too high. And I'll always put my hands behind my back in a good stance, and I'll say, hey, take a shot on me. And they'll shoot and they'll run into my head, and
Yeah.
I'll say, did you get your takedown? No. Why? Because your head's in the way. I said, okay, well, get your head in the way. Like I'm always I'm always yelling at them for that. But I think I think it'll come. I think it'll come. It just takes time and repetition.
Over and
So with the
over.
reshots every single practice, like they're not gonna have a
Ev-
choice. Like, yeah, I'm kind of forcing them against their will.
That's good though that you reinforce those fundamentals, the head positioning with them. It's
Uh-huh.
interesting what you said about their stance, the weight on the back foot. I always said you got to push off your back foot when you look to
Hmm.
score. And
Yes,
you're right though, as folk style wrestlers, Northeast guys are super heavy on the right leg. If
that's
typically most
right.
people are righties,
Right.
and then you're setting yourself up to get ankle picked, low single,
Yep.
snap
Yep.
down. So that's interesting. Talking about maybe you want 60% on the back, 40 on the front,
Right.
something like that. I'm just brainstorming here, but
Hmm.
that's good stuff, though. That's good to hear. Do you promote freestyle and Greco within the club? Like, is that something you emphasize as a former national
I
champ?
do.
Like, did that help you? Yeah, I want
I
to get your
do.
thoughts on that before you go.
I feel like I promote it. So every Sunday, we call it Suplex Sunday. We focus freestyle Greco, mainly Greco, because I feel like our upper body attacks are, I feel like our upper body attacks,
They're weak, coach?
not weak, but I feel like if I, okay, so my coach, Moran Karchalava, his son is Carson Karchala on Ohio State right now. So he would always have this saying that not less than 10% of wrestlers have mastered the art of throwing. And when you look at the highest levels and some of the, when people have the debates about who the greatest wrestlers that ever lived were, if you notice, all of them are extremely good at upper body throws and they can throw. You know what I mean? Most of the time when we have that conversation, our bias immediately goes to Europe and we say, oh, Adam Satiev, Buzavar Satiev. And we start talking about all of the Europeans. And all of
Yeah,
them can throw from anywhere. They can throw as well as they're versatile with their leg attacks. So and in high school, if you can throw and if you can score with upper body attacks, you're already a beast. Most kids run away from those positions. They flee
they
from
back
those
up.
positions.
They back if they're in
Exactly.
the over under. They pushing the hips back. They're trying to flee. They're afraid. Now you got
Mm-hmm.
them on the back foot. I
Because
hear
they're
you.
not comfortable with it
I
at
love this.
all. So everybody has leg attacks.
Everybody.
Now we learn some upper body attacks. You're 10% better than the other. So I feel like that's one of our ways to get ahead. So every single Sunday
That's
we're doing freestyle Greco.
phenomenal. That's
Yes, sir.
phenomenal, coach. I know you got to go, and well, I'll let you go in like two.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
um, yeah, I did a clinic over the summer, and we were showing like inside trips. One of the wrestlers that used to compete, he graduated on our college team. Gavorg, he has a Greco background. He was really big into the throwing, and then I learned a lot from some of these wrestlers that I coach. That's the best
Hmm.
when you learn from them, like
Exactly.
different
Because they have
styles,
their specialties and skill sets.
right? So, no, I feel like the Greco can go a long way. I trained Greco and freestyle, not extensively, but just here and there in the spring and the summer. And
Right.
now as a coach, I see how important it is because it's really like another sport. The
Right. Most
rules,
definitely.
and you know how you said it before, like instead of us training, you could do spring sports, you could do other sports, but why don't you focus on freestyle and Greco
Yeah.
instead of trying to go? Because a lot of our clubs up here are folk style, folk style, folk style heavy.
Right.
So I think that's good. You do Suplex Sunday,
And one of
and
the
then
biggest things that I learned from freestyle and Greco was bottom defense because you have to stay flat. You have to know how to offset that pressure. So like once I started training freestyle and Greco, I never got tilted again because you got to think about it. If you can stop someone from turning you and they can lock their hands, once they're not allowed to lock their hands on folk style, they should never be able to turn you again.
Facts. Yeah, you got your belly like if your thumbs are up and you're wide, I always say like hitchhiker, like they
Yep,
don't even know what
yep.
that reference is because no one's hitchhiking, but keeping
Right,
your thumbs up and on your belly, and then you're right. If they go to gut wrench you on one side, you hip down the other. And then at that point, that
exactly,
transfers into folk style. So it's like, yeah, you really shouldn't be getting turned. The problem with folk style, then we got to work on clearing
exactly.
claw
And
and
like
clearing leg
that's
rides,
why I
all
feel
that.
also that youth wrestlers should learn freestyle and Greco first.
That's a good point. Yeah, broke up. Yeah. Last thing we were talking about was youth wrestlers, freestyle, and Greco first. I think Coach Irons makes a good point because it just builds a solid foundation, builds a solid base.